sold a long time, but they turn kind of an orange.
Yeah, I've got my neighbor's oaks there. I couldn't figure out where all these oak leaves were coming from because I didn't want to put them in my mouth, but.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have no public comment today for item number 3. Item number 4, approval of the October 10th, 2023 Public Safety Committee meeting minutes. Motion by Supervisor Marash. Oops, sorry. Give me 1 second. All right, good. All right, second by Supervisor Mask. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Policy issue discussion, potential committee determination. We have none. Operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Discussion of human resources, finance, and property committees 2024 proposed budget and possible recommendations regarding modifications. With that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Leonard. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair Boots. This is just a recurring agenda item to allow for continued discussion and questions you may have relative to the budget. So we have a number of staff here and happy to answer any questions or provide any insight we can.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Supervisor Robinson said, I believe, during the executive committee in regards to, in the future, having the treatment courts and services, pretrial assessments, case management, and diversion programs separated out from the administrator's budget.
Thank you. Anything further? Go ahead.
Forgot. For victim witness position that's paid through ARPA, I know that that's going to sunset. Do we know when that sunsets?
The funding is provided, at least through the proposed budget, through the end of next year. So should an alternative funding stream not be identified and a new position be created through the existing ordinances for the county, which is 4.20, that's when that position would sunset. I do believe Teresa's in the back. Their prosecutor, did that get extended? Here, I'll give you this. Grab this too. Yeah.
Thanks. So the prosecutor positions that we have right now, we've had one full for quite some time through the ARPA funding through the state. We have preliminary word, and it seems very optimistic that we are going to have funding through the end of 2025, which would be great because then I would have better recruitment for the second ARPA position that we have available to us from the state. So we have not received confirmation on that yet, but it is very hopeful. And we should, I thought we would by last week, but hopefully in the next week or two we'll know more about that, and I can definitely update the Public Safety Committee about that. I don't have a date on that either.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we'll move to 6B, discussion of Marathon County Assembly's Ordinance 12.04 draft from CPZ.
All right. I'm Shad Harvey, Land Resource Manager. We just kind of wanted to go over the draft with you guys. I know last month we gave kind of an overview of 12.04. Just to give you a little bit more background, October 9th, we sent out and circulated the ordinance to all the towns. In that, we did give them a deadline till November 10th to get back to us, but we did receive some input from the towns stating that some of them, with their town meetings, they wouldn't be able to make that timeline work. So we did extend that 5 more days to November 15th for a deadline for them to give initial comments back to us. We did circulate to the standing committees, ERC, infrastructure, public safety, and as well as we circulated two of the big events that happened that this ordinance would oversee, the Taste and Glow and the Edgar Steam Show. And then we're just kind of back to the committee to see if the committee has had a chance to review, has any comments, questions. And then the goal is to take those comments and questions back to our work group meeting to discuss and try and address those.
I got a couple questions. So this is just for the unincorporated areas, so basically the townships, or it doesn't apply to the cities and villages and all that?
Correct. So this ordinance is for all unincorporated areas in Marathon County, so the townships, yep.
Okay, got a couple other ones. Let's see here. So how many events, say in the past 10 years, how many events have we had like in the county that have in like the unincorporated areas, is kind of like a rough estimate, how many do you think we have?
I think for the majority, it was roughly about two. The Steam Show and Taste and Glow are the two big ones that we know of currently. We do have special events that happen, but those are the two that would get the numbers that this ordinance would.
As far as a specific number, or even, probably a general estimate, you're probably somewhere around 5, 6 maybe. The problem is this ordinance hasn't been enforced the past few years, so it's tough to judge what events are actually going to be affected. We know for a fact that Taste and Glow will probably be part of it. The Steam Show will be part of it. They're basically doing what's in this ordinance anyway. So we anticipate some of the dairy breakfasts, if they get real big, they may be part of it too. But yeah, my guess is probably in that 5 to 6 may get scooped up under this.
5 or 6 per year, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And two of those are, regularly occurring events, the Steam Show and the Taste and Glow.
Okay. The other one I had was on the fines. It just seemed said $1,000 to $25,000 per incident. That seemed to me, it seems pretty excessive, but that's the way I look at it. But
so with the fines portion of it, the citation, our first option is education. That's why it's written as may instead of shall. That way we can use some discretion as to whether or not we should cite a organizer for that. The idea is it's tough to anticipate how many people are there. If you have an event where you say you're going to have 2,000 people there, and all of a sudden the word gets out and there's a lot of interest, and you're all of a sudden over 3,000, now you'd be part of the ordinance. That's an opportunity where education about maybe next year you come and get a permit just in case. That way you're covered anyway. Or if you're planning to expand it, you think that you're going to have the 3,000 people there. The citation is a lot of times comes into play when an organizer calls us, gets the information, they're told that they do need a permit because they would fall underneath this ordinance, and they refuse to do it anyway. They just do whatever they want to do, and they're not going to follow any ordinance that's set out forth by the county. That's a blatant disregard for the ordinance and the rules that everybody has to follow. So that would be an example of a time we would use that citation.
I just had one more too. Is mainly the reasons, like if they need to have government support that that we get reimbursed, is that kind of that, or is it more to restrict the people? I'm just kind of.
Yeah, the intent of that area is addressed in the ordinance as far as potentially having reimbursement to the county for services that wouldn't normally be required unless that event was being put in place. But the whole intent of the ordinance is to protect health and safety, making sure, again, that there's enough bathrooms, security personnel, things like that. So the whole intent is to protect the community itself, the property in which it's going to be on, and as well as the surrounding community that isn't involved with the event.
Thank you.
If I can just add one thing to the forfeiture, I think that's a great question. And I think it's really important, not only what Garrett referenced, that our standard practice across CPZ and other areas is that opportunity for education. But the other part is, if people feel as though the forfeiture is excessive, there's a process for that. You can go to court and you can challenge not only whether or not you intentionally violated and that the ordinance in terms of the forfeiture is satisfied, but also the amount. So I think it's really important to remember, just like any other citation, I'll use myself as an example, that I might get from one of Chad's fine personnel, if I feel as though there's a opportunity for me to make my case for a lower forfeiture, I would have the opportunity to do that, just like anyone here would have the opportunity as well. But if you're looking for the clear language, I think with respect to the purpose and intent, the sub 1A kind of lists out those two big things. And like Garrett and Shad have stated, this has really been kind of brought forward. It was pre-pandemic, we started having these conversations that were started by your exact point that, hey, we're seeing more of these kind of events where people are asking for county support, whether it's the highway department or the sheriff's office for assistance. That caused us to look at our existing ordinance, which when we did that, Corporation Counsel's office gave us a pretty clear direction that we had some issues we needed to address in terms of enforceability. So kudos to the work group, and I know you have two members, Supervisors Marash and Mask, serve on that work group, to taking a very detailed look at each of those issues, not only starting with purpose and intent, but all the way through to the forfeiture. So happy to answer any other questions, but I thought those were two great points, and I just wanted to, again, reinforce. People have the opportunity to contest not only the forfeiture itself, whether or not they violated it, but the amount of it.
Go ahead.
I'm curious as to what kind of feedback you got from the towns associations.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, they have till the 15th. So far, we've only heard back from the town of Harrison. Some of the feedback that they have gotten back to us was just some questions about fencing, traffic control, things we would be requiring to complete the criteria in the ordinance. As far as we have had some towns indicate that they are going to be sending us extra comments and things like that, but as far as that's the only one that's specifically gotten back to us as of yet. And again, they have till the 15th, so we do have some time yet to get some more input. And most of them are just based on guidance, like for example, let's see here, traffic control, what would be required in that type of plan. Recommended security amounts, what would the county be looking for? So kind of a lot of the guidance documents that would go along with it.
Anything further? All right, thanks, guys. All right, we will move on to 6C, jail kitchen resolution. I assume I can turn this over to Chad or
Me.
or
Please,
you
me,
or
Mr.
Chris.
Chair.
Chris,
Thank you.
never mind. You're
Not
just a
to
pretty
preempt
face in the
Chad,
crowd. Is that what this is? Oh,
Yeah. We'll work it out with Chad after the meeting. No, I know I've spoken to this project a couple of different times at this committee, but I want to give another high-level review just to kind of set the context. We've worked through the final pieces of what will be needed for Summit, the contracted vendor, to operate out of the cafeteria space at UWSP Wausau. We anticipate being able to get that set up and be able to run in about 4 to 5 weeks, depending on equipment lead time. There's also other factors like the staffing effort on Summit's side and things outside of our control, like Christmas and hunting season. So we will likely end up shifting that to January as a firm start date, but that's all to be determined. But the pieces are there, and we're ready to put them in play at the appropriate time. Ultimately, this sort of stopgap in between while the jail kitchen space would be getting constructed, it will pull the work away from North Central so that any staffing concerns they have wouldn't impact the jail. And then it would also require the jail, Summit, and North Central to work together on a smooth transition plan and we would coordinate all of that once we have clarity on the rest of the timeline. The timing is a big reason why I'm here today with an up to number in the resolution. As you know, November is mostly wrapped up in budget deliberations, and there's only one board meeting in December on the 21st. So moving it forward now essentially removes up to 6 weeks of time to just wait for approvals. If it's approved this week, it means that we can finalize the bid package and issue the RFP this week. So then that gets the ball moving in terms of getting things set up for construction to begin. The up to number is one that's less than what I previously reported. I'm confident that the project costs will come under that further due to the fact that we were able to make a successful appeal to the Department of Corrections to move the kitchen out of the secure perimeter. And so there are things in there that are very robust in terms of materials. It will still require some extraordinary demolition, let's call it, but we won't have to replace it with the same sort of robust materials, which really pushes the costs upward if we were not allowed to carve that out. So that was a huge win for us in terms of the project overall. The up to number due to that variance is allowing us to work. We got it last week. So since then we've been working on, okay, what are the alternative materials? What are things we don't have to do so that we're, chipping away at the cost to bring it down and down. That effort's not completely final. Again, why the up to number is there. Just looking at a conservative umbrella, which does include the contingency. It includes the need to, there's some adjacent space at the jail kitchen area that will need to be moved for jail staff. So that's an all-inclusive number that would cover it. There's still double secure door entry and exit into that space, but part of the argument to DOC was like, we don't have Huber, there aren't going to be inmates working in there. We took video, we popped the ceiling tiles and took video to show like there's really no sort of security concern if you were to allow us to carve that out, and so that really helped. In the resolution, it does say to use ARPA funds, but that's more of a placeholder until HR Finance or yourselves determine if they want to approve that, and also if there are other funds to use. But really, the only other funds I can think of would be contingency funds, which I believe there's still $800,000 in there. So overall, this resolution allows the work to begin sooner rather than later, and gets things out of the way so that you have that January start date for Summit to be working in the cafeteria, for the construction to be ongoing, and then in the few months it takes to complete the work there, Summit will transition out of the cafeteria space, and we're out of there. So then it's all going to be back in-house. And if you remember with the Sheriff's Office budget discussion, and I think it was a couple meetings after that as well, having the food prepared on site will also generate some savings as well that will help kind of give you an ROI on that jail kitchen being put back back into the jail space there. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them, or Chad can answer them.
Questions? Go ahead.
So if we approve this today and it goes to finance and then from finance on Thursday to county board?
Yes, ma'am, that's the intent.
What are the wishes of the body?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, send it on to finance.
A motion, second by Supervisor Opel. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, 7, educational presentation and committee discussion. Regional Forensic Science Center update.
I'll start, Mr. Chair, and then I'll turn it over to Jess. She's got all the details, but we've given a couple updates, and for those of you that have tuned into the Regional Forensic Science Center task force meetings, we've been keeping them updated as well. Suffice to say, we've been continuing our fundraising effort. In fact, right before walking over here, Sarah was giving me an update on another grant we were submitting for, and that's really been the focus. So we had that original kickoff meeting some time ago, which we updated you about, that we reported to you that went very well. It was well received. I'll steal the good news, and then Jess will have the details. It went so well, in fact, that we did receive a grant award from the BA and Esther Greenheck Foundation for $1 million to support the project. So that very substantial allocation toward making that project a reality. We continue, of course, to engage with local funders. In fact, Dr. Warden and I have some meetings with some local foundations. I know Jess and Sarah have made presentations through the Community Foundation. So that work is really ongoing. We're also doing some additional work relative to the architect. Chris and Jess have been leading that effort, so I'll turn it over, but staff have been really trying to be as diligent as we can and trying to engage with local leaders and foundations to really, quite honestly, just communicate the value of the project, not only for Marathon County government, but the people of the county and really the entire population of the state of Wisconsin will benefit from this project, particularly anyone in central and northern Wisconsin. So a lot of work ongoing. And Jess, you want to take us through kind of the work you've been doing with the architect and with Chris?
Yes, thank you. Me and Sarah have been working really hard on the grants. Like Lance had mentioned, last week we had the opportunity to present at the Community Foundation Donor Forum, where we were able to present the project to over 400 different people, which was a huge success on our end. The presentation went well. We've had some follow-up discussions with some of the different foundations and organizations after that meeting. So we have a few new leads that we have to follow up on, but the capital campaign piece is coming together as well as possible. The biggest hurdle we'll run into is some of the deadlines for the grants. Some foundations have meet only once a year where they accept their applications in the first quarter of next year. So we won't know about those grants prior to project approval. The other thing we've discussed, which I can let Chris talk about the facility plans a little bit more, is the timeline as to when we would like to move the project forward. And the consensus right now to stay on track with construction and have the best opportunity to work with the different construction firms would be to bring the project forward for approval to County Board in January, going through obviously this committee first, HR Finance, and then the full board. So that's kind of our plan right now. And Chris, did you want to talk about the construction manager and?
Yeah, so I guess, was it last week or the week before? Time is flying. We did put out an RFP for construction management services. There's no additional fees wrapped up in that, so we're not coming back for that. The pre-construction portion for a construction manager is comparatively small. If the project goes forward, that's where they start to make their money in terms of making the project happen. But we completed the RFP. It did require interviews, so it was a good bidding process. The interviews went very well, and it was a very close decision in the end. Once a contract is in place with the winning firm, we can talk a bit more about that. But as a part of that process, we've already scheduled a fundraising kickoff meeting with the winning firm as well, because part of the asks we had of anybody who was submitting a proposal was, what sort of work can you do and can you do to help support the capital campaign portion that the county's doing? So that was part of the discussion, and that meeting will help kind of bring them into the things that Jess and Sarah and Lance have been working on quite a bit and see what opportunities they can also find. And that can include a number of things. It could be sort of in-kind donations on material or labor, things like that, conversations with different contractors that might come onto the project, winning bid packages. But that's to be determined. But nevertheless, the point is that it's important to have them on board, not only as construction manager, but playing a role in that process as well. We'll also be meeting with them to bring them fully up to speed. And then they, as construction manager, we have cost estimations done as part of the design process and the construction document process. But whenever you have a construction manager come on, you verify that cost estimation. So what they'll do is they'll go through with a fine-tooth comb and say, from our perspective, the cost estimations are good, maybe this needs to change, or they'll have ideas about alternatives, whether that be material or approach, things like that, that can change the nature of the project somewhat to, again, chip away at the overall cost. Not that it's always trying to take costs down, because sometimes you might want to add value somewhere else that you can, if you take funding from another piece. But again, a part of the RFP process was making sure that everybody submitting a proposal was hyper aware of the fact that it's kind of like a hard bid project. It's not it's more like a negotiated contract, like a school district would go through, because they have a set amount of funding as well for a referendum or something like that. So them coming in, they're very aware of the situation on the funding side, and those conversations on cost estimation and just in general will help them bring their lens to bear upon what we've done to date. Another thing, November 22nd, Jess and I are going to be presenting down at Portage County's Public Safety Committee to present everything we have to date, answer their questions, and help them determine if they'd like to support the project and at what level. If there's interest there, I imagine we'll also be asked to present to their finance committee and then ultimately to the county board either in December or January. And that's in line with the timeline that we have on our end that we've been putting together, which essentially would mean bringing the project forward. This is the tentative plan in January through Marathon County committees and the board, so that if approved on January 23rd, then January 24th would be kicking everything off. And that situates the project well within a bidding window. It really doesn't raise any concerns whatsoever from anybody that's been involved to date, architects or construction manager or, in-house. So that aligns well, and we'll bring back news from that meeting once we go through that. But that conversation has been ongoing between myself and the county leadership down in Portage County. I got a recent email from their leadership last week kind of teeing that meeting up, saying they've discussed it previously. There was interest for them to have us come down and talk about it in more detail. So that's what we'll be doing.
Then the last piece that we'll touch on just briefly is, that's everything to get the facility built. The next part is how do you run it? And so Jess and I have been, we met and we're working with HR to really put together what would be a recruitment plan. So job descriptions for forensic pathologists, because what we don't want to have is a building and then start recruiting. We want to have a plan to make sure that those timelines kind of align so that when you have the facility, you can start operating within it and first and foremost, delivering value to all the people that would use the facility, but also we need to generate revenue. That's the whole point of this facility in terms of operating. It's got to be cost neutral. So we're putting together a recruitment plan, and we'll be working through the committees, just like Chris referenced for project approval. But your ordinance that I referenced before, section 4.20, lays out timelines. So we're thinking that January, February timeframe will start that engagement process to lay out for you what it would look like to conduct that recruitment so that we can bring that pathologist on, quite honestly, before the facility is finished, so that they can do things like generate policies, so that when we do have the facility completed, if the board approves the project and moves forward with construction, that we can actually begin operating on day one, as opposed to, hey, now we're going to start recruitment and it's a 6-month recruitment for one of these highly sought after forensic pathologists, which we've talked about before with this committee, so I won't go into detail, but certainly, as we've said, they're sought after nationally. There's not just a shortage here in the state of Wisconsin, it's a nationwide shortage of forensic pathologists. So we want to be on the front end of getting our ducks in a row so that if and when the facility is open, we're able to operate. So I know that was a lot, but happy to answer any questions. I know Supervisor Mask was on the Regional Forensic Task Force meeting, and we went through a lot of this information already. So that's kind of where we are and where our efforts are going to be moving forward, but happy to answer questions.
How many employees besides the forensics pathologists do you need to start the facility?
So the forensic pathologist, one would be ideal to start prior to the operation of the facility, and that's pretty much to get the policies and procedures in place. If we can find a location to conduct autopsies ahead of time, to start training some of the staff on how to conduct autopsies, getting some of those flows worked out, and also to assist with the database, because we have a phase 2 of the database rebuild that strictly is for the forensic pathologist. So it would be nice for them to design that and for them to really be able to choose how the office operates instead of us trying to figure that out and then have them fit into that mold, because it's going to be a complete different shift of how we do everything. So that would be one position, and we would need 2 other positions. So it'll be a second pathologist and then also the autopsy supervisor position. And that position would be the primary autopsy assistant. So they'll be the ones actually doing the autopsies with the pathologist and be more in charge of the autopsy flow and procedure of the morgue. So the decedent intake, decedent release, making sure all the paperwork is filled out properly, helping with making sure supplies are stocked, just kind of that whole autopsy side management.
Will all the lab work be done right in that facility too?
No, so only the autopsies would be done at the facility. So what happens is any samples the pathologist takes from the different tissues would have to be sent out to a different area to process on the slides, and then those slides get set back where the pathologist can look at them. That there's, not that I'm aware of, there's no medical examiner office that does that in-house. And then toxicology would still be done externally. You would need a forensic toxicologist and a whole lab. The only office in Wisconsin that has an in-house forensic toxicology is Milwaukee, and that's due to their volume.
Thanks.
Yep, you're welcome.
If I can add one thing on that, Jess alluded to the fact of, recruiting that pathologist, the one pathologist early, and, our preference would be, like Jess laid out, finding a suitable location to do autopsies before our site is up and running. And we have a meeting with just such a facility that we'll be having in the very near future to try to see if that's something we can get in place and at least have a tentative agreement before the board has to consider it, so we can lay that out for you as well. But if there are pieces that you think we're not thinking about that we should incorporate into our planning, please let us know. But as I shared before, staff are working kind of on each of those sides, the capital side, the construction side, and then planning the operations as well.
Anything further? All right, thank you. We have 8, next meeting date and time, announcements, and future agenda items. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Supervisor Marash, I did see a request. I'll talk with Lance about that later, and we'll probably get that on an agenda.
I think we're all set for both December and January.
Okay, perfect.
The requested individuals are available.
Okay. And then 8B, next meeting Tuesday, December 12th, 2023 at 1:30. With that, I will take number 9. Motion made second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.